What's going on, beautiful J4 family? Welcome to another edition of J4 Conversations. This is a solo edition where Dad is just going to kind of muse on the topic that you can see there, the profound question of the 21st century. Are mixed race people still black? Wow, y'all. I didn't even know that this was a phenomenon. I didn't even know that this was a contemporary conversation heavy on the spirit of biracial children, whether black, white, biracial, Latino, white, Asian, Native, whatever the case may be. And so today I wanted to take a little time to chop it up around this particular subject matter. Are mixed race people still black? If you guys are just joining me, welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to see you. Would love to know who I'm conversating with, if y'all can hear me, if the volume's right. If so, if you could just jump in the chat, let me know where you're from. If you are biracial yourself or a parent of a biracial child, would love to know that as well and just kind of get a sense of who's in the community. So, a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. So, I'm biracial, born in 1968 to a Creole African American father, born in New Orleans, raised in Gary, Indiana, at a time where biracial was not even really a classification on any kind of outward designation where one could formally identify as biracial. Just as a kid in that time, you just had to kind of figure it out. And so I did a recent YouTube presentation with my good friend of mine, a gentleman named Gene Boyd. He too is biracial out of the Compton, LA area. And to be quite honest, even though this is a dad's conversation channel, it is one of the most popular YouTube sessions that we ever did. And it let me know that there's some high interest around the biracial category. So I have to confess, hey, Dr. Wynn, how are you? Definitely want to get your thoughts and opinion here. I have to confess, I'm YouTube pimping, y'all. The old man is YouTube pimping. The algorithm says there's an interest in the biracial category. In fact, if you just type in biracial in YouTube, the video that we did is the fourth video that shows up. And there's been some buzz around it. So I wanted to kind of continue around the subject matter of biracial. And so I did some research and I realized that the young people are sort of struggling with this duality, this duplicity, this intersectionality of identity that they have. And, some of them are having a lot of angst around the matter of being forced to declare one way or the other, or kind of psychologically have to choose between one parent or the other in the identity dynamic. I certainly can understand that. Feeling certain kind of pressure around questions of where you're from and the exotification of biracial, all that kind of stuff. And so, I thought I would kind of delve in and take a look at the topic. So when I did my research, I see biracials are fighting for their lives on TikTok. Don't quite know what that means. Mixed race or black, what to call myself, right? Are biracial people black, right? So the old man thought he would throw his hat in this particular conversation. Would love to know what your thoughts are. Are mixed people still black? Now, so my identity, 1968, obviously a very light-skinned presenting. I consider myself black, so I would answer the question: are mixed race people still black? I would say yes. But I'm still realizing that this is an intergenerational kind of conversation, and that someone who is born, in 2000 or let alone 1990, whatever the case may be, that the conversation and the question for them may be vastly different than someone that was born in 1968 and actually created. I was created. I mean, mom, mama, and daddy got together, did their thing. I was created in 1967. Which at a time where there were misogynistic laws prohibiting or considering it illegal to have interracial relationships, let alone marriage, in 17 states at the time. In fact, when my dad returned from France, where he met my mother, they had to pick a state where it was legal to have interracial marriage, and Illinois at the time was one of those places where you could legally be an interracial couple when he returned to the United States in probably 1966. But sometimes when I'm giving a speech, I like to say I was created a criminal, right? This is the ridiculousness of America's racialized nuance. But I have to acknowledge that my ascension into a blackness was to get out of the proverbial gray of biracialness. I had to land, y'all. I could not just sort of be in this perpetual small group of military kids with black dads and Korean, German, French mothers. That world was too small for me. And so I decided that on my way to college, that I was going to get out of the proverbial gray of biracialness and land in a black space. And I did that in college in terms of a cultural immersion, assertion, becoming black frat, black classes, black friends, those kind of things, black relationships. And that has been the identity that has forged me kind of going forward in both my personal choices, romantic choices, but also career choices. So I see a Cardero Holmes. How you doing, brother? Glad to see you. Appreciate the thumbs up. Carl Sketch Williams, what's going on? Afro Scott suggested one of your streams. Good work, I see here. All right, brother. Appreciate y'all. So let me know what y'all think about the question. Are mixed race people still black? And I'm going to kind of explore it. All right. So I will admit one thing, though. I can imagine that if a child is raised by their white parent, that it would weigh heavier on their spirit about in terms of not necessarily claiming a solidarity with one of their identities, particularly having to live and interact and interface and be amongst the loving embrace of their white parent, but then also go through the identity dynamics of a blackness. I understand that. I also understand the dynamic if you're raised in a two-parent home and you have sort of an equal voice and an equal presence and balance between black relatives, black home, black aesthetics, white relatives, white nuance in the home, whiteness, pervasiveness in the space. I understand there where you would sort of be more in the middle. So to sort of tip my hat a little bit, my parents divorced when I was 16. To be fully transparent, I had sort of a tumultuous relationship with my mother. And so a part of my ascension into 100% blackness was likely a result of sort of a tenuous relationship with my mother, a divorce at 16 when I went to live exclusively with my dad, and my dad coming off an interracial marriage went into his own black renaissance, and I, as his child and son, was a part of that and frankly benefited tremendously from that. So I understand that the grappling, I understand looking at some of the YouTube videos, the struggle that the beautiful young biracial kids have. But for my world, for my 50-year-old world, I consider myself culturally to be black. But this question is also relevant to the fatherhood space, in part because my children, I have 6 children, and they would be what you would appear to be sort of biracial presenting. And y'all got to work with the old man. There's a lot of new language and vocabulary around biracial stuff. So the academics are really doing a lot of work in the space of biracial and identity. And hats off to you. So I learned a new word, biracial presenting. So they're about as light as I am. You know, their hair certainly symbolizes that they are they have a black component in their DNA blueprint. But they're also very light skinned. But you know, their mother's black. I consider myself black. You know, I oftentimes consider it the overcompensation of light skinned folks, where you get blackity black, right? And so they grew up in a world that put a premium on black centeredness, put a premium on black cultural nuance, and also certainly put a premium on a healthy sense of cultural esteem rooted in a rich, complex narrative of the black heritage and cultural experience here in the United States of America. But I must admit, y'all, I didn't know, and that was really for lack of being attuned or focused. And it wasn't until Gene and I did the session called White Mothers and Their Black Biracial Sons that I realized there's some interest and some energy around that topic. So today, I want to just explore what would it take? What would it take, beautiful family, for the question to even be legitimate? What would it take for the question to be even legitimate? Are mixed race people still black? Or the inverse of that, have we evolved over time has the percentages and numerical representation of biracial become at such a level to where the cultural glue and the cultural membership in blackness is now sort of becoming so loose, so disenfranchised, where the question of is biracialness an identity unto itself. Some people may be saying it is already. That's how I identify, therefore it is. I understand and respect that. But in terms of the black-white mixed combination, for the most part, any representation of blackness, both legally, historically, but also in terms of navigating culture and youth culture and social interaction, biracial kids with hints of blackness tended to at least be considered a part of a black experience, assuming they wanted that and they could sort of pass sort of rituals and trials of membership. We talk about that in the white mothers and their biracial black sons. Be sure to check it out. All right. So before I break this down a little bit for my own thoughts and process, Dr. Wynn, if you're still in here, let me know. Beautiful folks, I see you. Come on in. Come on in. If you have a biracial child or are biracial yourself, I'd like to know your thoughts on are mixed race people still black? All right. So what would it take, family? What would it take? What would it take for biracialness to actually become its own racial category, right? Well, the first thing it would probably take is a distinctive designation, a way to declare in some sort of formal, official way that you are identifying as biracial. Do we have this? We do. In 2000, the U.S. Census bent towards popular feedback. It sort of acquiesced to the changing demographics of the United States of America. If you look at some of the statistical data, only about 3% of babies were interracial in 1967, the same year that misogynistic laws were removed as illegal. Only about 3%. You fast forward to 2015, around the latest data set that I could put my hands on, and it has exponentially grown to 17%. The reason we're able to understand this data is because it is now tracked in the U.S. Census. So one of the first distinctions, if you compare other racial categories, they have ways of designating themselves, and America in 2000 created that in the most formal governmental document that exists, and that is the U.S. Census, which sort of tells our story as a collective people, both demographically across a number of variables, and it gives a measurement in a current time, lets us know where we were, where we are. It presents statistical data, disparities, whatever the case may be, and informs law, policies, budget kind of decisions kind of going forward. It's a powerful document. It should be a remunerator where you go to people's houses and ask them the different census questions. To put you out there with the public, I'd recommend it if you had a chance. So first criteria, is there a way to designate? And that has been the case now for 22 years or 2-decade periods. All right. So that one exists. Let's see. Dr. Wynn says, as my kids have gotten older, 19 and 20, they went from identifying as biracial to both of them identifying as black. All right. Now, makes sense. I don't want to put you out there, Dr. Wynn, but Dr. Wynn is a beautiful white woman, one of our strongest ambassadors here in the program. And she and I always are sort of vibing in the space of parenting and biracialness. And so they identified as biracial. That kind of squares with my earlier premise that if you have a predominant parental figure that is white, even though you are biracial, you would sort of want to lean that way just out of navigating home identity politics, I would imagine. Raised solely by their white mother, yes, supporting them in denying, in identifying, right, all right. And I will say right up front, Dr. Wynn is a strong advocate of the children certainly being rooted in African-American experience. Support them along their journey, right. As a caveat, as a side note, parents, whether you're a white parent, black parent, Latino, Asian, whatever the case may be, support your beautiful seeds. Support your beautiful seeds in their process of going through identity exploration. It'll take on different forms. The questioning will be largely around their aesthetics, their phenotypes, things that are visible, right? These visible physicality, biological traits will often be points of either membership or outgroup membership, or curiosity or youthful child ribbing, right? And so a biracial kid, despite the increases in percentages, will likely have these moments where they're outgrouped by their peer group, and they're going to feel some kind of way about that. And when they're feeling uncertainty about identity or membership in their peer group, they need to go to love. They need to go to embrace. They need to go to care and comfort, and someone who can sort of remind them of how beautiful they are, remind them that they're exactly the person that they're supposed to be, and meet them kind of where they are. As they get exposed to perhaps some low-level history, Western history in high school, middle school, again, the dynamics of America's complex posture as it relates to race, that'll then raise some additional kinds of questions. And then certainly when they get into relationship seeking, that biracial nuance will play itself out as well. And then, of course, popular culture will always have something to say around the space of race. But all you can do is listen, hear, love, encourage, have them read, let them know about cultural heroes, but just really expose them and then let them land where they land. And then also talk candidly about your thoughts around their identity, and hopefully legitimizing importance to know and love all that they are, both in terms of heritage and biology. All right. If you guys have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. So we talked about one requirement being a designation, the capacity to identify, to publicly label yourself, and that has now existed for 22 years. Before it was a theory and conversation. Now there's some criteria. Okay. What would be the next criteria? Well, one would be significant mass. Significant mass is the number of people of such a volume where they have to be thought of perhaps as a distinct category unto their own. Right now, or prior to 2000 at the US Census, most people, if they were biracial and had a sense of blackness in them, they would identify as black. And after 2000, that sort of changed by two or more races, whatever the case may be. And now we can track data to see what are the critical mass. When I was born, only 3% of the populace was interracial. The mass was not there. It wasn't even really an issue. We didn't have any voice, no lobbying kind of groups, no real articulation for our distinctive kind of identity. And again, as I said before, even if it was, I wouldn't have joined it. I'm very quite content in, again, an intergenerational footing to be within a Black cultural identity space. However, as time goes on, as the laws began to change, as people began to become more mobile, as the educational rates increased, as employment nuance began to diversify and integration began to set in all of its complexity, you began to see this intermingling among the populace in ways that historically weren't there in a pre-civil rights kind of era. So what is there a significant mass? Well, there were 9 million people who identified as biracial or multiracial in 2010, okay? There were 9 million. Does that seem like a lot, y'all? There's 350 some million people in the United States, right? So 9 million consider themselves interracial or multiracial in 2010. Now, does anyone want to know what it is in terms of the millions? Or would you like to guess? I don't know if you're still on, Cordero or Carl Sketch. What you think, Dr. Wynn? It's more than 9 million, I'll give you that. And this is according to the Pew Research study. At this moment, in 2020, it was 33.8 million. So in 10 years, it had increased at a rate of 276%. The identification of two or more races from 2010 to 2020 increased by 276%, going from 9 million to 33.8 million. Roughly 2% of the total population. It was not even measurable in the 70s and 80s. Okay, so criteria two, built upon a distinctive designation, U.S. Census 2000. Is there critical mass? Is there a critical mass? 33.8 million people in 2020. And is that mass likely to stable off, or is the number likely to increase? Is the number of interracial kids, two or more races, likely to stabilize, or is it likely to increase? Well, let's look at it again. 1967, misogynistic laws overturned. 3% of the population, 1967. In 2015, it was 17%. Is the growth trajectory of, interracial marriage. 1967, 3% of interracial marriages exist. 2015, 17% of interracial couples of the total populace that are married. That means more people are in interracial dating marriages, and if history repeats itself, these couples will produce babies, and these babies will then be one, two, or more races. 3%, 1967, at the turn of the misogynistic laws under the Loving case. Fast forward to 2015, it is 17%. 17%. Now, for more trivia, and let me know if y'all doing all right. Throw a little comment in the chat, or definitely head on over there to YouTube and J4 Conversations. Give us a subscribe, share outward, check it out. We'd love to have you see some of the other content and join us. Do you think it is African American white that is the highest percentage of interracial marriage? As biracial black white, we tend to see the world from our own lens. I thought it was. But I was wrong. I'm getting educated a whole lot in this interracial space. I was wrong. In 2015, of the breakdown of the 17%, Asian and other was 29% interracial. Now, interestingly enough, Asian is the only one that's declining. Okay. I think in 2005, they were in the 39% interracial marriage, but now they are in the decline, meaning they are no longer marrying interracially at a growth percentage rate, but they are actually marrying more in monocultural kinds of marriages. They're the only ones doing that. The Hispanic is the next at 28%. 28% of Hispanic other marriages are 28%. What's going on, Granddad? Good to see you. I'm telling all of our business, y'all. This is Granddad, who came to America in 1966, had to pick a state where interracial marriage was legal. It happened to be legal in his state where he kind of grew up, Gary, Indiana. And they moved to Illinois, a little Air Force base called Chanute Air Force Base, and it was legal, so they wouldn't come and arrest him. And then he committed a federal criminal act by producing me in 1967. So, Pops, just telling all the business. All right. Black is 18%. 18% of interracial marriages are black and other, and then it's 10% for whites. I say all this to say that this is the third category. A distinctive designation to identify as one or more races, check. That's 2000 census. Significant mass in the current moment, 33.8 million in 2020, a 276% increase since 2010, check. And what is the growth trajectory? What is the growth trajectory? Data would suggest that there are going to be increasingly more and more interracial couples marrying if you follow trends over a period of time. Okay? So how we feeling out there, family? Y'all doing all right? Y'all doing all right? If you have questions or comments or agreements or disagreements, feel free to throw them in the box. Now, the other category, the fourth category I would suggest, is that there would need to be significant scholarship, significant study and research around the phenomena, the nuance, the complexity, the variables, the distinctiveness, the trends, the patterns of biracial kids or multiracial kids or interracial marriages, right? What is the data? What is the research? Are they pointing out distinctive nuances that plays themselves out from a social anthropological perspective when it comes to interracial couples, biracial children, multiracial children? Are they doing studies on income, educational attainment, crime, health factors, home purchases, stress factors, anything that you could sort of study and then examine that upon a populace of people who have a common distinction between same family marriages versus mixed kind of couples and biracial or multiracial children. And then this is further nuanced because it isn't just the black and white narrative of the 20th century. It is now a multicultural narrative, and it is not just white women, men of color. It is all gender nuanced, it is culturally nuanced, it is beyond black and white. And how do all these complexities play out so that you can tell some sort of consensus or narrative about the unique experience of being biracial or multiracial? Well, I did a Google search. I didn't research it all, but I went to Google Scholarship, and there are 22,000 pieces on Google Scholar dealing with some aspect of biracialness or multiracialness. That means this thing is being studied. This thing is being researched. People are getting their PhDs. They're teaching courses. They're talking at conferences. They're delivering papers at symposium. There's groups that are forming. There's conferences. There's associations. So this thing is already beginning to take one of the seminal steps in terms of possibly declaring a new identity, is that is to be able to say something about it, to say something empirical about it, to say something that's been vetted, to say something that's been studied and reviewed by peers and other academicians, right? To be able to tell a narrative that is a complement to a dominant identity, cultural identity, but also an independent presentation of scholarship, research, and study unto itself. There's over 22,000 pieces on that. In fact, at my university, there was just recently a critical, I think it was a critical biracial conference or something like that. So folks are beginning to gather, whether they are of a biracial dynamic or a multiracial dynamic. There's high curiosity, there's high scholarship that's being done in the place. And people are asking the question, is biracialness still an identity associated with blackness? Like to know your thoughts there. Like to know your thoughts. Again, just to recap, hope y'all are doing well. Hope you're doing well. I'm enjoying myself on a Thursday talking about this biracial dynamic. Granddad, I didn't know that the biracial babies were struggling. I didn't know that they were just in angst. You know, maybe that's the naivete or the racialized obscurity of a biracial kid born in 1968 that, you know, I couldn't play the biracial game. There wasn't enough of us. We couldn't have the biracial game, the biracial intramurals, the biracial crew. We had to make a decision. We had to make a decision about membership. And for me, as I talked about before, as long as I could hold my own in black circles, you know, talk a little smack, hold my own in sports or whatever the current youth trope was that you had to overcome, you know, you could find a way of membership in the blackness. And I have some thoughts about biracial kids who struggle with acceptance in the blackness. Maybe I'll do a session on that one day. But I found there was a pathway into blackness as long as you had a sense of love, a sense of wanting to be a part of it, and that you could hold your own in appropriate ways, appropriate with your age set, you could gain membership. I didn't see a pathway into whiteness when I was 10 years old in 1978, or when I was 16 years old in 1984, whatever it was. Whiteness could always go at your phenotype, your hair, whatever the case may be, and it could outgroup you, right? So you can never get official full membership in whiteness as a biracial kid. And as I talked about before, I was done playing that cultural balancing act, and I wanted to go where I could be accepted, I could be a contributor, I could learn and understand the nuances of the culture, and I could become. That was my journey. But as I said before, young person born in 2004, shit, they're in a whole different kind of reality and a whole different kind of world. So I understand the constant question of biracialness, of identity, and those kind of things. So let me take a look at what we have in the chat box here. Book recommendation. All right, Beyond the Whiteness of Whiteness. Go ahead. Memoir of a White Mother of Black Sons by Jane Lazar. Yeah, we have to check that out. Though she was married to a black man, so her sons were raised with a black father, she explores what it's like as a white woman to have black children growing up in her belly and gets deep with poetry, etc. Yeah, y'all check that out. Beyond the Whiteness of Whiteness by Jane Lazar. We do not exist outside our history. Our lives uncomplicated by what came before. Jane Lazar. Yeah, yeah. The same way I'm sort of steadfast in all of my absence of melanin in a black home, a black founding, a black rhetoric, a black ideology, a black worldview, is because it was the condition of my time. It was the condition and response to my time, to my era. Hell, 68 was only 3 years post civil rights in terms of legal or mandatory integration backed by federal law or executive law or the threat to remove federal dollars from public institutions, right? Right? This is pre hip hop. This is pre intense diversification of schools. This is pre class and wealth growth among communities, and there's a correlation between wealth growth and multicultural communities. If you look at where most interracial couples get married, they get married from cities. They live in cities. They live in urban centers. An urban center is a destination where people come for various reasons, largely among that to go to for work, right? And the more cosmopolitan, metropolitan a city is, the more people you're going to meet and discover things that you wouldn't have discovered, not things, but people or personalities or different types of people that you wouldn't have discovered in a rural, segregated America, right? You have the great migration to northern cities, to urban centers. And with that is people discovery, and that has impact on marital choices and love interests and those kind of things. And kids are growing up in a vastly different kind of time. And so they pose different kind of questions. Dr. Wynn says Trevor Noah's memoir is powerful also. Yeah, Trevor Noah, a hell of a comedian out of South Africa. I think he does the Today Show or something like that. It was illegal for him to work besides his black mother while his father was white, right? And he's telling a continental story about being biracial in South Africa in the midst of apartheid. So rich stories, complex stories. I don't begrudge the identity struggle. I understand it. And so I'm sort of playing with what would it take? What would it take, beautiful family, to even contemplate the question, are mixed race people still black? All right. Well, you would need a distinctive designation. Check. You need significant mass, 33 million. Check. You need growth trajectory. Check. You would need scholarship to tell a story, to understand the people, to juxtapose them against other cultural groups, especially if they're advocating to become their own. 22,000 plus articles. Check. But what else would you need? What else would you need to happen for the question to even be legitimate? Are mixed race people still black, or in the context to become its own distinctive cultural category? What else would you need in addition to those 5 variables? What do we think, beautiful people? Well, it has something to do with the cultural community that biracial kids, black, white, biracial kids are currently a member of. Again, assuming they've chosen to fall within a black membership pattern. Okay, what would need to happen? What would the predominant black majorative need to do in order to significantly, directly, in a profound way, raise the question in a legitimate way for biracial or multiracial black-white dynamics, kids to consider their own race? And I'm saying all this because on YouTube, a lot of people are challenging mixed kids ain't black, mixed kids ain't black, and they're interesting commentary on it, right? That's what it would take. The fifth category, if my numbers are right, would take a lack of acceptance or rejection from black culture. In order for the question of biracial, multiracial kids to legitimately move down a path for a declaration of its own unique identity, it would take a rejection or a lack of acceptance or a kind of push out, a kind of marginalization, a kind of you're not welcome anymore. The law that created you to be a part of our community is antiquated. It doesn't have enough substance to it, doesn't have enough legs to it. It would take a loud enough swelling of voices by the predominant black cultural not leadership, but agency, whatever the groundswell that defines that. It would take the outright rejection of that entity, of that agency, of that collective in subtle and different kind of ways, direct and indirect. It would take the outright rejection and refusal to accept a person who is biracial presenting, to accept them in your membership. That has never been the case on mass. That has never been the case on mass. I just got back from a week-long father-son trip to New Orleans. And as you all know, New Orleans is often synonymous with Creole, right? Now, Creole arguably could be a subset of black culture, very unique to Louisiana and New Orleans. But even in that sense, although there was some class and color rub tied to that still sort of became a collective sort of ethnic identity within a blackness, probably the closest thing to its own independence, assertion of something new, something beyond. I don't mean that in a hierarchical kind of way, but something aside from a blackness. But even then, it never sort of became something, you'll have heritage groups and research around Creole and whatnot. But for the most part, Creole people consider themselves a part of the black diaspora, part of the American black cultural community, right? It would take the outright rejection by black folk of folks who are considered biracial. Let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on that. I don't see it happening on critical mass, but again, that's because most of my interracial circles are typically in my generation, they're in my age set, and they already have grappled with the identity of duality and intersectionality, and they pretty much lean and align and sort of associate from a black space. But I can see how a person today would not only struggle with it, have some nuanced political, cultural clash with it, but as young influencers, young thinkers, young people who sort of control the pulse or the tenor and tone of contemporary black authenticity, if they are then beginning to challenge for a host of different reasons that we can explore on another session, the legitimate membership of multiracial or biracial kids, it's out there on YouTube right now. It's out there on YouTube right now. Some small sector of the community of black folks say, hey, you light-skinned biracial cat, you ain't black. I'd love to have a conversation just to kind of see what's going on. Maybe there can be some collaborative opportunities here. If y'all know someone out there who are, sort of exploring this dynamic, or biracial kids, black or not, whatever the case may be, I'd love to chop with them. Send them my way. Maybe they can teach the old man something. Much respect to intergenerational change, and change is, from at least from a cultural perspective, is good. We needed change, and we got to say thank you to the ancestors who put in work with their life, with their legacy, with their life lived for a progressively better kind of cultural experience here in the United States. Hats off to the ancestors, hats off to the lived elders. But as they have achieved sort of racial success to some degree, the inheritors of that, the grandbabies, the children, right? They inherit new kinds of questions. I wonder what Sally Hemings would have to say about all this. I wonder what I'm trying to think of some other light-skinned cats. I wonder what Malcolm would say about this. What would Malcolm say? All right. Now, The last piece is I get ready to close out, and thank y'all for rolling with me, just having a little fun here. Would love to know if you have any questions or comments. Please throw them in the box. This would be the time to do it so that I could sort of take a look at it. I'm not seeing any at the moment. Dr. Wynn, thank you for riding with me. Big Granddad. The last thing that would need to happen, and this is the one I can't even fathom, right? It would need to have distinct traditions and customs. Distinct traditions and customs. Because simply declaring an identity on a census, that's not enough. Simply looking out about at a bunch of people that appear to have some kind of mixed heritage, that's not enough. You know, y'all might head nod. You might take that from the cultural glue of blackness. You might head nod, right? But that's not enough, right? Simply being able to read a little bit. Well, reading and studying and aligning to something upon a scholarship line, that's moving in the direction. If you were to feel rejected by a cultural community that you sought membership in, that might work. But the biggest thing would be to is how would you create your own cultures and traditions? And if y'all looking in the chat, that's my dear friend B. Smith, Brian Smith. We have another light skinned friend. We call him the what do we call him? B, uh, the Black Samurai. His mom was from Japan. His dad's brother called him the Black Samurai. But yeah, Paige is black. He'll fight you if you were to call him biracial. And he has much love for his Japanese heritage. But again, he's in my age set. Different questions, different time, right? So the sixth piece, and again, I'll just recap. A way to identify U.S. Census 2020. Significant numbers, 33 million in 2020. Projected growth, interracial marriages is 17% and ticking up. There's scholarship. You can study the group. There's critical mass and academics around it. Over 22,000 articles. A rejection from the community. I don't feel that. Young people tell me otherwise. And then you would need the capacity for traditions and customs. Now, there are organizations, there are conferences. I imagine there's acknowledgement rituals of the beautiful duality and multiplicity of the people. So there's some distinction that's going on in the multicultural world, the biracial, multiracial world. There's some distinction, but if you look at culture, it glues itself around holidays. It bonds itself around aesthetic, common music, common tradition, common heroes. If you look at other groups, Puerto Rican parade, Chinese New Year, all those kind of things. I don't know. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. In fact, it's this is all a little bit just kind of me philosophize and have a little bit of fun because, as I talked about at the opening, one of our most popular videos on J4 Conversation is white mothers and their biracial black sons, where Gene and I just kind of pour out our journey through into blackness from white mothers and black dads and all the beauty and complexity and overcompensation and use of the N-word, all that tied to that stuff. Yeah, we were struggling trying to figure it out, and the pathway was to a black cultural home. But today it's a different time and a different era, and I'm seeing not only interest in biracial conversation. Bless the beautiful biracial babies trying to think it out, because identity is a hell of a thing, man. It gives you position in the world. It gives you membership and association with a critical mass of people. It gives you a measurement of achievement. And it also gives you a sense of where your deficiencies are. And if you have a sense of cultural membership and loyalty, you're going to want to work on that towards equity and solving problems that are laid upon your particular group, right? Biracial kids through my generation and probably the next generation did that from a black membership. But times are changing, and we're starting to see a seminal act, a seminal piece that in order for biracial kids en masse to really feel a disassociation with blackness is to be rejected by the love source that they sought membership in for quite some time. All right. So I'm getting ready to wrap. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. Put a thumb in there if you enjoyed it. Put a negative thumb in there. I don't know what a negative thumb is if you felt I was off base here. Again, though, for the record, this light-skinned brother considers himself black, but I understand biracial kids or biracial presenting kids, how you're dealing with a different time and a different kind of conversation. Would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Hey, if you want to help, you found this conversation this sort of thought-provoking or something to explore, please head over there to J4 Conversations on YouTube. Please give us a subscribe. Please give us a like. If you know someone who could maybe sort of in this community or grappling with these kind of questions, share it with them. Share it with them. Would love to expand the group and have more folks in the conversation. For those of you that are here, thank you so much. Truly appreciate y'all coming by. And if you have sons and or daughters who are sort of dealing with a biracialness, or if you just have parents that you just kind of want to have a sounding board kind of opportunity for someone that's been in this space for some 54 years, hit me up. Hit me up. Would love to kind of be available to you as a sounding board, or I kind of have some private conversations offline. Would love to chat with you. Would love to chat with you. On that note, I'm gonna close her out. B. Smith, thank you so much for joining us. What you doing up so late in the Carolinas? Dr. Went, thank you for riding with me. Granddad, love you, love you, love you. And Cordera, thank you so much. I don't know if you've been on before, but thank you for joining me. And then Sketch, tell Afro Scott that I appreciate him making the recommendation. All right. Beautiful family. On that note, J4 Conversations. Peace, love. Peace, love.